So I did one video already on this, talking about the transmission work that I did fixing a leak. The customer wanted me to also address a problem with the rear suspension. So I want to go over that, and it's kind of got some good relevant information for other people possibly. So this thing is on Fox air shocks, but it's got a modified off-the-shelf suspension kit. There's not a whole lot left, but this was a Rocky Road Outfitters coil spring conversion kit originally. And when I cut this thing in half and stretched it, I basically just remade the links longer, and then, that's really kind of hard to see, but I added to the original wishbone. This is like a wishbone style 3-link. So the upper link is kind of like a big A-arm. So it's got 2 points that mount to a cross member behind the transfer case, and then a single point on the axle. So that controls the axle wrap this way and the side to side, since this is basically a triangle. So what I ended up doing is replacing the joint. Now, this has got a 1.25 inch heim joint with high misalignment spacers. What it originally had was this Johnny joint style joint. And the problem that it was having is these guys are only capable of not quite 30 degrees total, so about 15 degrees one way to the other. And you know, this is not sitting in the vise how it would be in the vehicle, but for the axle to articulate, it can only articulate 15 degrees each way, which really isn't a lot. And if your axle goes beyond that, what it does is it breaks, you know, this would sit in the vehicle like this. And if your axle articulates beyond, you can see that inner piece, it'll bottom out, and then it'll twist this in the threads, and it'll break the jam nut loose. And so at some point, he got tired of it breaking it loose, so he welded the jam nut and also welded it to the threads of the actual bolt. And so this becomes your limiting factor for articulation, and that puts this under a tremendous amount of stress. Luckily, it never broke, because that's really only about a 3/4 inch bolt. I mean, this is kind of like a goofy homemade rod end where they took a joint that's meant to be, you know, welded into the tubing and welded a bolt to it to give it some adjustability. And honestly, that's a pretty small bolt, 3/4 inch. So now, with the heim joint, that joint is capable of approximately 30 degrees each direction, so 60 in total. So it's got twice the flex. And it's an 1.25 inch shank. So it's considerably bigger and has more travel. So it's something to keep in mind. I have on my Samurai kind of a similar issue. I use trail gear creeper joints that are similar in concept to this, but they're not like homemade like this. They're all one big forged body. And my suspension actually can bottom these out, and it does break the jam nuts loose every once in a while. So that's something that's on my list, is I'm going to be switching to this exact same style joint on mine. The bummer is it's kind of expensive. I've got to buy 6 of them to replace them all. But so these are definitely usable, but it needs to be done in pairs. So like this lower link, it has one on both sides, and so you end up with 30 degrees each direction because you're doubling it up since you have 2 joints. But on that A-arm, you know, since it's got 2 points on the frame, the whole arm itself can't twist, so 100% of the twisting has to happen at that end. So it's something good to keep in mind when you're building custom suspensions, is, you know, the limitations of whatever type of joint you're using. And You know, this stuff gets put under a lot of stress because you got to imagine if you've got a 4,000 pound rig or whatever, and you've got basically this length of a lever arm, you know, if you've got one tire up in the air, that's a huge amount of stress. So it's just something to keep in mind. Again, luckily this never broke. But I don't know, just good cheap insurance. So now that thing's got plenty of flex. It's got, you know, it'll never bottom out. This thing has a lot of travel, but not enough to bottom that out. And it's still adjustable, and luckily, got pretty lucky. The mounting width was the same, so I didn't even have to cut his tabs off. I cleaned them up a little bit and added some gussets because he had broken those off once before. So I added those little triangular gussets to it. But that should be the end of the story. Shouldn't have any more issues with that. Yeah, so it's kind of things I've learned along the road of building custom suspensions. So if you guys got anything to add or questions, feel free to reach out in the comments. Thanks for watching.